There is a shared metaphysical conjecture that we are prisoners in a devolved realm. Steiner's eighth sphere, Keel's eighth tower, and Metatronic inversion all point to a closed soul recycling loop that benefits the others. Could be the non-human masters of this planet, you name it. Now, you folks might notice actually that I am reading off of this little sticky note, virtual sticky note right here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I would like to thank the individual who sent this proposal or theory to me, because I don't want to take the credit where I didn't come up with this myself. Many of you, whether you're members or just those of you in the audience that aren't, which is great as well, send me texts, proposals, emails, things such as this that I'll be honest with you, I store them all as notes and I use them as references. And I know many of you, I asked you directly if I could use it in an episode and shout you guys out, and you say absolutely. So I do want to say someone sent this to me maybe a month or two back, and I don't recall personally. But if anyone can recall who sent this to me, I would love to give you a shout out and thank you so much for this. Now, welcome back, folks, to another episode of Let's Get Banned. Today's episode is called I Think This Is Where the Lockheed Craft Was Seen, the Rockefellers, Unusual Structures, Footage, and Rudolf Steiner. Now, you're going to see why and how all of this comes full circle. Now, for those that are members and for those that happen to catch the live stream yesterday being Sunday, and I believe members will be seeing this first, and for the public, we're talking about a week back, because by the time this goes public, it'll be about 6 or 7 days from the time I'm recording this. So you'll remember, if for those who know, that I referenced a particular quote by Colonel Philip Corso, and let's take a look. And I quote, "There's an old story I once heard about keeping secrets. A group of men were trying to protect their deepest secrets from the rest of the world. They took their secrets and they hid them in a shack whose very location was a secret. But the secret location was soon discovered, and in it was discovered the secrets that the group was hiding. But before every secret could be revealed, the men quickly built a second shack where they stored those secrets they still kept to themselves. Soon, the second shack was discovered, and the group realized they would have to give up some secrets to protect the rest. So they again moved quickly to build a third shack and protect whatever secrets they could. This process repeated itself over and over until anyone wanting to find out what the secrets were had to start at the first shack and work their way back from shack to shack until they came to where they could go no further because they didn't know the location of the next shack. For 50 years, this was the very process by which the secrets of Roswell were protected by various serial incarnations of an ad hoc confederation of top secret working groups through different branches of the government, and it is still going on today." End quote. Now, sorry folks, just had to mute my notifications there, forgot to do that earlier. Now, again, I just wanted to say very quickly, this is exactly what we seem to be visualizing and seeing what's occurring relative to the esoteric aspect of things, in addition to the technological and materialistic side of things. But interestingly enough, if we take a look at the infusion, if you will, a lot of people say it's conflation. I say it's infusion, excuse me, of the esoteric aspect merged with technology, we're going to find, as I've mentioned in previous public episodes as well, we're going to find that there have been loads and loads and loads of individuals representative of the government or in some indirect or direct branch, whether, ex-CIA, ex-military intelligence, things like this, you folks know maybe who I'm referencing, that are now accepting and admitting to things that, again, 10, 20 years ago, people would have said, bullshit, are you freaking kidding me? Just like, I'll give a great reference, the 2001 National Press Club Conference with Stephen Greer. There were reporters near the end of the conference during the question and answer period that asked some of these individuals that were willing to testify in front of Congress on this panel, over 400 or 500, if I'm not mistaken, military and ex-contractor, ex-CIA, Navy, Air Force, ex-NORAD whistleblowers willing to testify in front of Congress, who would say things like, again, for example, there is a satellite that collects all of the images that are taken for NASA, but before it gets to the official NASA satellite, there is in fact a satellite or database that scrubs all of those images. Again, I use this example quite often, especially in quite recently as well. And those reporters in the room didn't believe it. They were saying, you're saying there's a satellite that scrubs every single image before it gets to the official NASA satellite? Are you sure? And you can hear the reporters saying, I'm not sure. But again, you see, if you brought that up nowadays, everybody would say, Are you freaking kidding? Yeah, of course there is. You don't have to even be a conspiracy. You don't even have to be into any of this stuff to even think that. So you see how they're giving up, again, relative to this example right here, they're giving up some secrets to protect the larger ones. But here's the thing. Let's jump into the much larger secrets. So let's dive right into it. Now, first off, there's a few different things I want to cover here pertaining to, as you can see here, this is a bit of an expose of the things we'll be covering. We'll be looking at some footage, looking at some unusual structures and things like that. So let's start off Let's start right off by just taking a look at this right here. This was not done by me, I will fully admit. I believe I found this on the UFO Twitter hashtag community, if you will. Again, I don't know specifically who found this and who was the original source of this. However, this is quite consistent with some of the locations that are allegedly top secret, classified, you name it. Now, this is, again, these are snapshots of the footage of the TikTok video, which many believe to be a sort of a CCP operation with regards to how these people even got to this location and things like that. And then the way that it was disseminated online as sort of like, you know, the CCP's way of saying this is a sort of a counter move, if you will, in a lot of regards to what the US has been doing to, again, on the surface level. But anyways, we're going to see here that these images and snapshots from the video line up perfectly with, again, what seems to be Google Earth images, or again, could be MapQuest, you name it, but again, from an aerial point of view of the Helendale RCS test range. We see here, this is quite consistent. Now, a lot of people are speculating as to what this craft is. Is it a drone of some kind? Could it be telepathically controlled? Because it clearly doesn't seem like it could fit that of the size of humans, unless it is an extremely advanced craft, harnessing, again, super advanced holographic substrates that, I guess you could say, intertwine with that of pocket dimensions. It seems very small and thin on the exterior. The second you somehow hop inside in some way, shape, or form, it's much, much larger. Again, this is something that a lot of people have said they've seen during abductions, regardless if the abduction experience was positive or negative. With that being said, here's the next thing that I want to jump to immediately. Speaking of which, by the way, some of the Lockheed Martin executives and spokespersons refused to comment on this. They just said they have no comment. Again, makes you think why it's so out in the open, you name it. But we know that there's, connections to deep underground military bases and things like that. So anyways, moving on. Let's take a look at this website over here. inbrain-neuroelectronics.com. Restoring lives by decoding brain and nerve signals into medical solutions. High density and high resolution graphene intelligent neural systems. Now take a look. I'm not for the record, I am not attempting to slander, defame, or anything of the sort this particular company. I do think it is a great representation as to how the formal, I guess you could say, evolutionary biology of external apparatuses pertaining to transhumanism are consistent with what Rudolf Steiner, I guess you could say, argued, presented, proposed, theorized, give or take, I'd say literally 100 years ago. So anyways, and I quote, "At InBrain Neuroelectronics, we are scientists, doctors, techies, and humanity lovers with the mission of building neuroelectronic interfaces to cure brain disorders. We use graphene, the thinnest material known to man, to build the new generation of neural interfaces for brain restoration to help patients around the world. Graphene is the next big thing in bioengineering materials, which are pillar components to the next gen of electrotherapies in the steadily growing field of neuromodulation. Why now? What is the challenge?" Now, again, before I go on, I want to say, if the elites of the world, if we knew deep down in our hearts their intentions were good and positive, regardless of if you think it's one big group running things, if it's an extraterrestrial entity or interdimensional entities or both or all in many different factions, regardless of what you think, these things could be used for very positive impacts and influences. But I am reminded of the multiple experiences in which there are not just certain extraterrestrials telepathically speaking, human looking, gray looking, interdimensional sort of oriented looking, as Jacques Vallée has quoted in many of his books with respects to the consistency of data points and sightings. They all speak about how it's fine to evolve technologically, but you need to have self-control. It pertains to almost everything else in life in terms of a balance, right? Don't eat too much. Don't overwork yourself. Don't over-exercise. At the same time, don't be too lazy. It's the same thing. Don't spend too much money. Balance in life in general is key. Moderation, as they say. Now, again, I'm not a therapist trying to tell you how to live or how to think, but interesting that those principalistic foundations seem to attribute to all of the different elements and I guess you could say elemental aspects of this life that is ingrained within the system from an economic, financial, materialistic standpoint. Again, ironically enough, shows you how these elites are just jamming things into our minds, whether it's through advertising, you name it. Now, let's take a look, and I quote, "With more than 35% of the population afflicted, the cost of brain disorders is about 800 billion euros a year in each of Europe and the USA. The cost of drugs is about 20% of this financial burden, their side effects delivering additional cost. Oh my gosh, if only, 0 point energy were to be revealed, and the cures for cancer, devices that could treat and cure cancers literally almost instantly, as many whistleblowers have said. But anyways, bioelectrical implants could be the faster, safer, and side effect free alternative to conventional medicines. The existing brain interfaces are all metal based, with considerable restrictions for miniaturization and signal resolution, therefore limiting their therapeutic effect. In brain neuroelectronics brings a disruptive contribution to brain modulation. Again, end quote. Before I go on, take a look at this. For those that are members, you'll have a much better understanding because of the roundtable and things like that you've been probably privy to seeing in the last fair bit of time, or maybe later on depending on when I'm recording this. But take a look: in-brain graphene, in-brain artificial intelligence, in-brain technology. Now we can quote here from Colonel Philip Corso discussing that the integrated circuit chip came from that of reverse engineering at Roswell, but we also have to be very vigilant of the fact that as much as Colonel Philip Corso knew, I'm sure there was a lot that he didn't know, that he didn't even know he didn't know, because of the compartmentalization of things. Now take a look again at the honeycomb structure relative to, members will know this, the footage on the backside of the alleged footage from the dark web of the backside of Mars from the late 1970s, early 1980s. Honeycomb-like structures, again, consistent with the former Israeli space defense minister speaking on how there are underground bases on Mars and what have you. And in addition to this, we find, again, the hexagon, the honeycomb structure, whatever you want to call it, reminiscent in that of nature. As they say, we get our best tricks from nature. But again, interestingly enough, how can we say we get our best tricks from nature if it's that of a simulation? It's all about perception and understanding things. Now, let's move on from this website here. Take a look. LockheedMartin.com. How the fantasy of invisibility becomes reality in the sky. Now, I would like to relate this to a quote that Mr. Bruce Fenton said on our roundtable yesterday, as of the time I'm recording this. So take a look. And I quote, when asked, what kind of superpower would you like to have? Most of us say invisibility. Even Derek Jeter. Invisibility, like the ability to fly, is the stuff of childhood dreams, and for decades, cloaking devices have been a favorite plot device of science fiction in Harry Potter, Star Trek, Doctor Who. Today, the F-35 strike fighter jet makes this fantasy a reality as it navigates airspace with the most advanced powers of hide and seek. Its multiple stealth devices, radar-absorbing materials, and internal infrared sensors comprise the ultimate invisibility cloak. Now take a look at this. In the F-35 and elsewhere, stealth and cloaking technologies have become more comprehensive and durable, with applications for military and other industries. This is what happens when science meets imagination. No. Before I go on, end quote. This is what happens when jackasses hide shit for a very long time, and then they decide to release it because, again, going back to the example of the shack that Colonel Corso gave, Colonel Philip Corso, gave, you got to give up a little bit to hide the rest. You got to feed little droplets, dangle it in front of the public's eyes, and then, just stash the rest even more and more tucked away. Anyways, take a look at this. With improvements, and I quote, tanks or planes can be cloaked from human observation. Car trunks can be made see-through. Blind spots can be cloaked to be seen easily, or cloaking can even be used as art or included for architectural effects, said Joseph Choi, a researcher with the University of Rochester's Institute of Optics. Cloaking, which makes objects partly or wholly invisible, manipulates the direction of visible and near-infrared light or electromagnetic waves around an object as if it weren't there. Now take a look. For an invisibility cloak or shield to work, the material needs to curve waves completely around all dimensions of an object and work with all backgrounds and angles of view, end quote. Again, regardless of what you think of Bob Lazar, I'd like to use the reference of him and Jeremy Corbell going on Joe Rogan's show 2 or 3 years ago, saying that at the time when he was working at S4, allegedly, he claimed that the scientists on the public academia of things thought that gravity was a particle. Turns out gravity's a wave. We now know that to be a fact. How convenient that that's how invisibility works as well too, which is why I'd like to bring up the reference to Mr. Bruce Fenton's reality engine, if you want to call it. What do I mean by what did Mr. Fenton mean by reality engine? Well, we were speaking on the roundtable. For those that are members, you'll know, but for those that aren't, we were speaking on the roundtable about how these anti-gravity mechanisms arguably should not even be called anti-gravity, because again, regardless of who you listen to, Lou Elizondo, Stephen Greer, Bob Lazar, if you can have, and we know they've really done it, but let's play hypothetical for a second. If you are able to create an anti-gravity device or mechanism, it's not just anti-gravity. You then have everything you see in Star Wars and Star Trek and sci-fi films becomes real. In what sense, Dave? Okay, you then have invisibility. You then have force fields. Except this time around, unlike in the movies, force fields actually get stronger the more they're penetrated because of basic kinetic energy, piezoelectricity, things like this, right? With that being said, interesting how it's all consistent with respects to the way in which there are forms of invisibility and cloaking. Now, take a look at this, and I quote, "The Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory at the University of California recently created an ultra-thin invisibility cloak, a thin film of magnesium fluoride topped by small gold antennae that can flexibly wrap light waves around any shape and create illusions to match different backgrounds." Okay, it does that by controlling how reflective light is scattered and therefore what the viewer sees. The cloak's creators say it can be draped over any object to obscure it or make it look like something else, end quote. Going back to Mr. Fenton's claim about how it should not be called an anti-gravity engine or propulsion device, rather a reality engine. Why? You remember, folks, in the previous public episodes how I gave the example of, I think it was 2 or 3 episodes ago, you wake up on a beautiful Sunday morning and you have to change the sheets on your bed. Think about our reality being these multiple layers of the bed, of the sheets on the bed. The very bottom layer of the very lowest bed sheet is the free energy ether realm, if you will. And so we right now are living in a multi-layered electromagnetic onion bed, whatever would help you understand things better. And so it's not so much that these anti-gravity devices propel the craft off and create an electromagnetic energy around it, so much as the anti-gravity engine, but as Mr. Fenton calls it, the reality engine, and I'll explain shortly why he says that, is pulling back all the layers to access the ether realm, the free energy realm that Nikola Tesla advocated for so much, and I'm sure knew quite extensively about it as it pertains to, again, Majestic 12, and you have it, and of course he wasn't a part of that, but that whole correlation there relative to the time frame of how things happened in a geopolitical sense. However, again, I'd like to reiterate, it's not so much the energy being put around the craft when they take off, these alien craft, but it's also, it isn't the energy that's put around them more so as the energy that is tapped into below the different layers of the electromagnetic spectrum that we simply cannot do because of the suppression that has occurred so strongly, which goes back to my sticky note earlier. Again, not my sticky note, but of someone's who shared this information with me. Again, thank you so much. Saying there is a shared metaphysical conjecture that we are prisoners in a devolved realm. All right. Now, here's the next thing. Let's take a look at RAND.org. Now, the RAND Corporation, for those who don't know, again, for those that have been following the show for a while, whether members or not, you'll know that I speak about RAND quite often with respects to no one knows what the hell they're doing. It's true. No, I mean, it started off as Project RAND, standing for Research and Development, which later then became the RAND Corporation. Again, if you just check out their website about what they do and stuff like that, it's a bunch of vague terminology. No one really knows. They're involved in everything. So anyways, let's take a look here. What is the Internet of Bodies? This is RAND.org. The Internet of Bodies, or IOB, is actually an ecosystem. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the internet that contain software and that either collect personal health data about you or can alter the body's function. We think of the Internet of Bodies as this collection of all these devices as well as the data that the devices are gathering about you, end quote. I thought that we had that naturally, that sort of hive mind consciousness, if you will. I mean, some people propose that, but again, what we're finding is that there's a mass suppression of things, and I brought this up again in the roundtable as well, too. As it pertains to, it's almost like there's a distortion of mass consciousness relative to the elites or those at the top of this power structure that we have believed in order to allow them to continue to move up and up in a fake hierarchical structure, but it is only real to the perception of us because we give it that power, which I will substantiate very shortly with a quote from Rudolf Steiner about interdimensional spiritual beings, if you will. The point here is this: why are these elites trying to recreate? I mean, we know why, but let's just be hypothetical. Why are they trying to recreate this type of structure, this type of internet of everything, when we already have it within us? Because, again, sort of like the artificial Merkaba, sort of like, again, the artificial form of not breaking free will, but bending it. They want the control of the hive mind consciousness by using transhumanism, as has been reported in Jacques Vallée's books, relative to the consistency of warnings pertaining to artificial intelligence and being careful with technological evolution. And in addition to that, we have very recently, I don't have the article pulled up here on hand, but very recently, a former Facebook executive basically said with respects to artificial intelligence, if I'm not mistaken, those within Silicon Valley are trying to create God, basically. Anyways, let's take a look over here. There are pills now that have an electronic sensor that let a healthcare provider know whether you have taken the medication. Other things like precision medicine. So precision medicine is the idea of creating pharmaceuticals or treatments specifically for your body for your personalized treatment. Yeah, they already have it. Don't drop feed us this nonsense. Just put the devices out, cure the cancer, drop the social power structure. But again, it's not going to happen, at least in this relative to, the vicinity of time that we perceive it in a linear fashion at the moment. And I think Internet of Bodies could really help with that, because nowadays a lot of healthcare is based more on average reactions, whereas with data from IOB devices, you might be able to really more precisely treat a certain disease. End quote. Yeah, I agree. In pure theory, if it wasn't for psychopaths running the world, and if it wasn't for the fact that we already have this consciously and energetically, this ability to do. Anyways, let's carry on over here. The freebird.info. We might already have scientific proof of ancient alien visitation. Why possible visitation in the distant past is relevant today, interestingly enough. Sorry about that. Let's take a look here. Skeptics who deny the existence of non-human intelligence often fall back on the arguments underlying the Fermi paradox put forth in the 1950s. The basic idea is that there has been plenty of time in galactic history for ETs to build spacefaring capabilities, discover our relatively young Earth, and establish a presence here. Because proponents of the paradox find no evidence of an ET presence on Earth, they claim ETs must not exist, making humanity the only intelligent species in the universe. Like Elon Musk glibly commented on Joe Rogan in February, "If there were aliens, I would know. We all would know because the proof would be apparent," end quote. Again, there's so many things, I guess you could say, that you can rebut from this proposal. Not to dismantle the Fermi paradox proposal, but we look at Alan Hynek, we look at Carl Sagan being forced by the public academia of individuals representing these institutions on a surface level of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, to suppress and say, no, I don't believe in alien life, it's all a bunch of bullshit, it's all nonsense. But then later in their lives, they changed their views, but it was too late because the damage was already done from a propagandistic sense. From a public sense, the damage was already done. Very similar to that of, again, Operation Mockingbird. When just because someone creates a story or a headline and it's true, it doesn't have to be true or not. If the headline gains circulation in the media, it doesn't matter if it's true. All the other outlets must report on it, or else they seem like they're out of touch with what's going on. Their journalists seem like they're not up to par. They don't have their finger on the pulse. You see what I'm saying? That's the unfortunate beauty of propaganda. When you put something out there, real or not, everyone's got to cover it. Because if one outlet covers it, why aren't the others? Whether it's true or not, it has to be covered. Because everyone's talking about it from a social sense. You see how they get you like that? Anyways, take a look at this. Interestingly enough, according to researcher Bruce Fenton, the same gentleman who was on our roundtable, this is not the first time the scientific establishment has cast aside reasonable evidence of ET presence. Fenton is the author of Exogenesis, Hybrid Humans, and the Forgotten Exodus, the former curator of the paleanthropology website ancientnews.net, and has appeared on the Science Channel and History Channel, including on Ancient Aliens. He claims that we have tangible evidence of non-human intelligence dating back to approximately 788,000 years ago, based on anomalous deposits of tektite glass characteristics of an artificial intelligence AI structure that monitored our planet before its destruction. If correct that these tektites found in debris fields extending from China to Antarctica are the techno-signature of an advanced civilization, they solve the Fermi paradox. As would be expected, there have long been civilizations aware of our planet and present in our atmosphere, end quote. Interesting that, again, the freebird.info, we can debate as to whether or not this is a mainstream media outlet or what have you, but the one thing I have with the Fermi paradox that's so, I guess, intrinsically disturbing to me personally, folks, is that if you, again, from a purely logical, reasonable perspective, I agree with the Fermi paradox. However, if there are advanced civilizations that are so advanced that, again, in some cases when we see flying saucers or their craft, sometimes it's not even their craft, which is why, again, Mr. Fenton refers to it as a reality engine. It's not just anti-gravity, it's not just invisibility, it's not just force fields, but those are some of the secrets that the military-industrial complex have had to now disseminate and give up, again, in order to protect the real secret ones. Now, let's take a look. The UAP that are in our skies now are not discovering us for the first time, but the continuation of a trend hundreds of thousands of years in the making. Again, the tektites provide important context as we strive to understand who they are, why they are, and what their relationship is to humanity. Take a look at some of this. Tektites, and I quote, are a particular form of melted glass, often associated with asteroid impacts. Tektite composition, formation, and distribution provide clues as to what event gave rise to them. However, in the case of the Australasian tektites discussed herein, their origin has not been conclusively decided. Other than that, they had to come from space. But what space object is responsible for them? Despite over 160 years of scientific debate, beginning with a first paper authored by Charles Darwin, the evidence does not cleanly and completely fit with the prevailing theories. The mystery attracted the attention of Bruce Fenton, who developed his own theory after conducting an extensive literature review and analyzing the common set of facts. His pending paper, Australasian tektites as extraterrestrial probe debris, anomalies in composition, formation, and distribution indicative of a previously overlooked technosignature, rebuts the asteroid hypothesis and suggests that the tektites are the wreckage of ET technology that was destroyed in Earth's orbit and rained down, creating debris fields in Australia and the surrounding areas, end quote. This would be consistent with many other individuals who have written in ancient scriptures that have been closed secretly and put aside. This is from my own research now, folks, not Mr. Fenton's, but that have claimed that they've been told by telepathically by sky gods, you name it, those riding the sky gods riding the chariots, again, ETs in their craft, regardless if they looked human or not. They would tell certain individuals around the world, relative to the time frame that could be redirected to Noah's Ark or Noah, to build large, I guess you could say, boats, craft, structures, you name it, and then put all the animals you can, because they need to restart this planet in a physical, materialistic sense by, again, they probably do it by flooding the whole planet, presuming, it would make sense, presuming this planet was a social experiment in many regards. So then, what they would then do is you'd say, okay, Dave, if Noah really did make his ark out of wood or whatever, how the hell did he survive that? These aliens, again, just my proposal, would probably, more than likely, put an electromagnetic field, rather than put a field, I should say, they would allow Noah's Ark to have the electromagnetic pure form of energy accessed into the ether. Same example as I gave with the peeling back the layers of an onion or taking off the top layers of the bed sheet to get to the bottom. That's what they would do so the structures that these individuals built would survive. We find this to be consistent within other ancient text scriptures, you name it. Now, take a look at this right here. The Pulse.1, Psychic Devices and Sentient Beings, an illuminating look at ATIP's technical reports. Okay, take a look at this right here. A security compromise happened on a website maintained by Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, before I go on, I believe he was on Joe Rogan, and he was kind of downplaying Bob Lazar and all that stuff. But anyways, the leaked slides revealed ATIP technical reports and the researchers who wrote them. The majority of the technical papers were about human cognition research. Why is a group in charge of investigating abnormalities in the country's airspace researching into human cognitive capacities and sophisticated space propulsion, end quote. Now, again, interestingly enough, we're going to find that for those that are in our Telegram group that are members of the Patreon, you'll see that I recently put, I believe it was Robert Reed, if I'm not mistaken, or Robert Friend. Anyways, sorry that I don't remember off the top of my head, discussing the cognitive aspects. Okay, now take a look at this right here. On August 7, 2018, a security breach occurred on a website managed by, again, Christopher Mellon. Those materials contained an interview with one of the pilots involved in the Nimitz incident, as well as a set of briefing slides about, again, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Those who have studied the phenomenon, again, I wonder if there was really a server breach or not, but, because the way things have to come out, it's interesting that the leaks have more information than the official releases, like the UAP reports and you name it. But anyways, those who have studied the phenomenon thoroughly are aware of the controversial Slide 9, but a deeper look into the research commissioned by ATIP is fairly illuminating regarding a major chunk of the program's emphasis. Although former ATIP director Lou Elizondo insists that the program was exclusively focused on the nuts and bolts of the observed occurrences, the leaked slides portray an entirely different image, end quote. Before I go on, whenever Mr. Elizondo is asked about, CE5 or human cognition, things like that, he kind of dodges it. Interesting, isn't it? One of the slides labeled, quote, contract focus expressly indicates that ATIP was in charge of investigating the validity of currently observable phenomenon, omitting any mention of sophisticated planes or vehicles. It then goes on to detail ATIP's technological research, which is divided into areas such as human interface and human impact. Again, this is a committed researcher is known as the Mind Sublime, has done excellent work digging deep into a handful of the studies commissioned by ATIP and those who performed them. Again, the findings are astounding. What we're going to find here, there were 2 ATIP studies linked with a researcher named Dr. George Hathaway. Although the study and research Dr. Hathaway conducted for ATIP directly is classified, it's not difficult to trace his background and areas of expertise. Okay, take a look at this. It is one of science's most odd and contentious discoveries is attributed to a Canadian inventor called John Hutchison. Again, the Hutchison effect. It is defined as a very, okay, I don't agree with this part, but with this word abnormal, but I quote, a very abnormal electromagnetic phenomenon that produces metal jellification, spontaneous levitation of ordinary material, and other phenomenon. The Hutchison effect, or H effect for short, is the name given to this phenomenon, end quote. Okay, now again, here's what they're saying. Oh my gosh, we didn't know. We're not sure. These guys know what's going on. Which is why I say if there was a leak on this, there was a breach to their server. I would like to think if there was again, I could be wrong, but I'd like to think if there was a real breach, they would dig much deeper and get much more intrinsic, detailed documents, if you want to call it. Now, why do I bring this up? Let's take a step back for a second, folks. Let's take a quick breather before we go on. Look, for example, at sort of the tribalistic factions that are developing within the UFO community. Again, Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo, those guys on one side. You have then Stephen Greer and others on the other side. For those that know what I'm talking about, you'll know the drama is quite significant. However, my argument is, to tell you the truth, as much as I respect both camps, both individuals, for their own varying reasons, and as much as I do disagree with many of what both sides have said in certain things as well, too, we have to look at both sides. People say, okay, Lou Elizondo, once a spook, always a spook. Once a spy, always a spy. Granted. Now, we also have to play devil's advocate and be consistent. I'm not trying to say what these gentlemen are saying are wrong, regardless of which side. And I hate to even say that there's sides in the UFO community now, but we have to look at both angles and come to our own personal conclusions. Now, take a look at this right over here. September 14th to 15th, 1993 meeting at Rockefeller's JY Ranch in Wyoming. Okay, Dr. Stephen Greer, 2nd from the left, Linda Moulton Howe, 6th from the left, Dr. Leo Spinkle, 7th from the left, Dr. John Mack, 9th from the left, Lawrence Rockefeller, 10th from the left. More identifications are pending. Now, unfortunately, I can't say, specifically where I got this image from, but it may already have been circulating online by the time this episode gets uploaded. With that being said, Mr. Greer, if I'm not mistaken, has claimed previously that he has been funded by the quote-unquote good Rockefellers. Now, look, again, I'll give the benefit of the doubt to everyone in the world, human, alien, you name it. Just because, you're part of one family or one species doesn't mean you're all bad. With that being said, some of you that might just have heard that are saying, Dave, holy crap, why would you say that? Again, let's be consistent. Let's be unbiased. Let's attempt to be unbiased, even though deep down we all know what's really going on, right, folks? But let's try and be unbiased and right down the middle. So we see here, right? We see these individuals. It really makes you think what the forthcoming revelations will be relative to an alignment with certain alien factions. I don't want to say species, because I don't want to put them all in one big bucket, but factions. Again, the thing I disagree with Mr. Greer on is not what he's speaking on in terms of the, these beings being able to interface with consciousness, which we on the show refer to as the 0-point field. Thanks so much to Camden and others too. But it's more so about, I personally believe Greer has been contacted and has been in contact, if he has been, with a certain species that he is representing and advocating for, which might not be a bad thing, or a certain faction, if you will. But again, we have to look at all angles here, and I do believe that he is so mesmerized. I don't blame him. If an extraterrestrial truly reached out to you, wouldn't you be too? But he just seems so, again, no disrespect to him, but mesmerized with respects to, again, the people or the beings that he's following, if you want to call it. Now, here's the next thing I want to take a look at quite significantly. Some of these unusual structures. I did not find this, granted. Again, these are all just assembled either from the audience, Patreon members, and also, again, Reddit, Twitter. But it's great to compose this and sort of compress this into one. Take a look at this right here, folks. Cocos Island National Park. Look this up on Google Earth. I don't believe these structures are natural per se. Also, interestingly enough, I'd also like to thank, I believe it was, I don't remember specifically, was it, I think it was Jason on our previous members call. Thank you so much, brother. You'll see here that he mentioned these could also be pyramids as well too. Again, look at the pathways of some of them. Let's also take a look at this image here too. Look specifically right off of Nicaragua and Costa Rica there. Take a look. The structures, again, see how this line sort of pushes out? It really makes you think as to whether or not there are certain apparatuses, certain mechanisms that are being harnessed relative to certain bases. And again, this is not a secret per se, because if we look at the previous public episode where we discussed, again, a lot of these military individuals accidentally left their Fitbits or their health watches on and traceable. And when you check their location, You could see it looked like they were underwater. They were under Antarctica. And there were quite significant amounts of geographical area that we never, publicly at least, we never thought would be possible, completely swept under the rug. No problem whatsoever. Now, going back to the Hutchison effect, quite peculiar in a very peculiar way. Take a look at this. I believe this image was taken, this is from Linda Moulton Howe, 1999. Again, we got to be vigilant of the image we just viewed, but let's also carry on, because if not, then who will, right? Micron layered bismuth and magnesium zinc from bottom of wedge-shaped UFO in late 1940s near White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico. Again, this metal could, when analyzed, if we're consistent with Jacques Vallée's testimony on Joe Rogan discussed, or his statement saying that the subatomic structures are so well structured and organized that it's almost as if, again, it would take billions, if not trillions of dollars to be able to replicate even a small amount of it. Well, take a look at this. Metamaterial, negative refractive index, the THZ wave guide, if you want to call it, the Howe-Puthoff presentation back in 2018. We see introduction here. We see wave propagation and imaging in non-magnetic line, or LHMS, excuse me. Now, if we jump over here, we see advanced space propulsion based on vacuum space-time metric engineering, Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin. A theme, and I quote, has come to the fore in advanced planning for long-range space exploration is the concept that empty space itself, the quantum vacuum or space-time metric, might be engineered so as to provide energy slash thrust for future space vehicles, end quote. Again, pulling back the bottom layer of the bed or the onion. Free energy, Nikola Tesla's free energy, the ether realm, whatever you want to call it. Now, take a look at this. Not that it's been provided, it's that the energy is always there, right? And again, these words, they have to be careful, but again, they say it for many different reasons because it's all about drop feeding to the public. Although far-reaching, such a proposal is solidly grounded in modern physical theory, and therefore the possibility that matter/vacuum interactions might be engineered for spaceflight applications is not a priori ruled out. As examples, the current development of theoretical physics addresses such topics as warp drives, traversable wormholes, and time machines that provide for such vacuum engineering possibilities. We provide here from a broad perspective the physics and correlates and consequences of the engineering of the space-time metric. Keyword: space propulsion, metric engineering, space-time alteration, warp drive, wormholes, polarizable vacuum, end quote. This, folks, would not be allowed to be discussed if those at the top did not give the go-ahead. I almost am certain of it, without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. Now, the reason I bring all this up is because if we jump back here to this alleged, leaked patent from 1998, 1999, copyright by Fuchs Media Associates, United States Air Force top secret nuclear-powered flying triangle, the TR-3B. Crew compartment, again, variable vectored intakes when pointed forward, one of 3 hydrogen-oxygen variable vectored rocket engines, landing pods, bottom view. This is, I would dare to argue, very outdated, very old. There are many forms of propulsion. They don't need to be mercury plasma or nuclear-based, if you will. But again, it seems like this mercury plasma accelerator ring also disrupts the magnetic field, MFD, similar to the Hutchison effect. Now, again, a lot of you might be saying, okay, Dave, what does this have to do with some of the footage? What does this have to do with some of the, I guess you could say, material you want to analyze moving forward? I say, thanks for asking. Well, let's take a look at this right over here. It's about a 2-minute video. This is from a surveillance camera of a cigar-shaped UFO going near a volcano. But look at this. So it comes in, all right, it comes into the view of the camera. All of a sudden, shrinks in a second. Which is why the whole concept of pocket dimensions, that Lockheed Martin craft looking like nothing on the outside but being something bigger on the inside, who knows, right? That's the thing. Look at this. Look at what it does. And I appreciate the person who brought in the bottom right zoom picture-for-picture shot there. You see that? It's like it's a ball of light. It's a hovering light. Now, again, maybe this is relative to the way in which those who are not privy to lower dimensional, when I say lower, I mean more closer to free energy, truth, perception, are viewing this. But again, take a look at this. Look at how it starts to move a little bit. We'll just skip a little bit because it kind of just sits around for a bit. Sorry, folks. There we go. Now it's going to take off again. And we are going to see it go from, again, tic-tac, sphere, whatever you want to call it, circle shape, ball of light, whatever you like to say. And we're going to notice as it begins to take off. Again. Oh, got to go the other way. It decides to change directions, and all of a sudden it becomes a cigar-shaped craft again. So again, that's this video here. Again, make of it what you will, folks. It's not for me to say. Really not for me to say. However, let's take a look at this video right over here. 52 seconds. Now, oh, excuse me. We see, again, the cigar-shaped craft. Little more metallic looking. Could be, again, representative of that of the Nachtwaffen, the rogue group. Could be representative of that of the, United States or NATO allies, reverse engineering. I will say this. I have nothing to go off of in this regard, but comparing this cigar-shaped craft to the previous one seemed to be far more biological, more intuitive with that of the esotericism of, I guess you could say, the world or dimension we're living in. This seems to be much more stationary, again, highly advanced, of course, but to the extent in which it could shrink or things like that, it's hard to say. Not because it's metallic looking, but because just the way in which it's maneuvered, the way in which it sort of, I guess you could say, behaves, the mannerism of it, if you will. Again, one thing that I try to use in terms of analysis that a lot of Patreon members will know with respects to viewing certain UFO craft and the way they move and things like this is what I notice is that the ones where allegedly extraterrestrials are maneuvering or controlling the craft, whether telepathically or not, it seems much more fluid and smooth, whereas when it's done seemingly by human or military personnel, it seems to be much more robust, as if we're driving a car, which kind of goes to show the intrinsic understanding that these beings have from a biological sense. Now, let's carry on over here to this website, beforeitsnews.com. I'm going to be bringing this up in an upcoming public episode, and I know that this website is controversial for misinformation, things like that, but I do have to say this particular article seems to be accurate relative to the data points consisting with it. Now, and I quote, "In June, investigative reporter Tim McMillan told the Basement Office host Green Street, a source inside the Intel aerospace world claims UFOs weren't flying saucers, they weren't Tic Tacs, they were something that possessed the ability to make your mind see what makes sense to you," end quote. Interestingly enough, this seems to be relative to what a lot of these alien beings have said to children over many, many years, specifically young children. And people say, why children? Well, because there's no nefarious plot to that, in my opinion. It's more so because, again, it sounds corny, but children are the future of things. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's going to be much harder to change the mind of some part of my English 75-year-old rich fat ass sitting on his billions of dollars than it is to have a child who's still learning about life. You see what I'm saying? And so I could see why they reach out to them in much more ways. Now look at this. 2 years earlier, a leaked slide, again from ATIP, talked about how the phenomenon can manipulate both physical and cognitive environments in order to penetrate U.S. facilities, influence decision makers, and compromise national securities. All right, Tom DeLonge, think of him however you would like, recently suggested they may represent a disturbing and ancient controlled mechanism, something Jacques Vallée has hypothesized in the past, which is interesting because and I quote, because when you take a look at this right over here, mindsublime.blogspot.com, communication with non-human intelligence, visionary experiences, and propulsion science in past. Look at this. There are 2 papers associated with Dr. Hathaway, again, Pluth Hathaway, in the slide as follows: Superconductors in Gravity Research, Maverick versus Corporate Research Cultures. Again, we're going to find Maverick versus Corporate Research Cultures, end quote. That is so vague, it could infer and be directed to a couple of different things. Again, dolphins, mavericks, again, the way, aquatic animals, the way that some of them speak telepathically, that those on the public level of science fully don't understand. We have no idea what's going on, right? So again, it could be that. It could be referring to certain rogue elements or rogue individuals that do not follow any conformity of law, if you will, similar to that of the Nachtwaffen rogue breakaway civilizations, similar to the example of what Colonel Philip Corso gave at the very beginning of this episode, right? Now, this is Rudolf Steiner quotes.wordpress.com. This is the part I was trying to bring full circle relative to, again, the Rockefellers that certain parasitic interdimensional entities seem to be controlling, relative to the consistency of the Hutchison effect, as Lockheed Martin has slowly been disclosing, which is, I'm sure, tech from like the 40s or 50s at the least, right? But again, giving up some secrets to hide the rest. Take a look. There are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear offer welcome food. There are beings, when humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. People not yet sufficiently convinced of this statement could understand it to be meant comparatively only. But for those who are familiar with this phenomenon, it is a reality. These are Rudolf Steiner quotes, by the way. If fear and anxiety radiate from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. Before I go on, 9/11, what just happened in Afghanistan, things like this. Not just distraction from a mental perception in the materialistic sense, but feeding off of the fear. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair, or doubt, are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they are being fed. Therefore, it is above all necessary to begin with that the person who enters the spiritual world overcome fear, feelings of helplessness, despair, and anxiety. But these are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism, because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It is especially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them. End quote. How do you call them up? I don't know, CERN, HARP, you name it. Now, we could also argue very strongly there are other factions of aliens that are trying to help us in a purely intentional way. But the question is, to what extent are we being assisted relative to other factions trying to destroy us as well? And I bring this up here specifically, scienceblogs.com, because, again, scientists successfully teach gorilla it will die someday. Why is that so significant? It is, again, this is in April 5th, 2010, end quote. So this is a very long time ago, 11 years ago, by the way, as of the time I'm recording this. Think about how we taught, as humans, I guess you could say, taught gorillas it will die someday to understand that consciously. That's what these certain extraterrestrial beings are doing with us. Whether it's good or bad, that's not for me to say, right? That's not for me to say. However, when we take a look at the holographic apparatuses, I guess you could say that all the Project Blue beams going on all around us, I mean, think about that. It's not that difficult to think maybe there may be some type of coercion of some sort or manipulation in a deceptive way. Now, going back to this sample right over here having to do with the metallurgy pertaining to Linda Moulton Howe, we see here, look at some of the metal waves that are very wavy, if you will. Again, similar to that of gravity being a wave, similar to that of what Lockheed Martin said about how, again, to make things invisible, you just have to make the craft be able to bend the waves around it rather than absorb the waves, the light waves, and many different things, gravity waves, you name it, right? So we see that is quite consistent, and these ruggedy edges do not seem to be ruggedy overall if we're consistent with Jacques Vallée's analysis of the subatomic structures of these metals being so precise that no human could do it because we didn't even know how to do it at the time, at least on a public level. And it seemed to be quite extensive enough in which, you know, no one on the surface knew what they were doing. Now, I would like to end off with two quotes from Mr. Steiner. I look at the bird in the cage and see the air. Not only the air that is around the bird when it flies, but I see and feel the formative tendency of air in its form. When I do all this, then what lives in the forms becomes enlivened and spiritualized for me. End quote. This reminds me personally, folks, of how these certain alien beings, again, good or bad, is not for us to say, because perception, that's a whole different topic, but their perception, our perception, but this reminds me of ionized air pockets. I mean, think about it. Not only for their craft, but again, if the craft is an extension of them in a lot of regards. Again, I know some species are more advanced than others, but it would seem like this would intertwine, not conflate, but intermerge, infuse with that of the spiritual esoteric realm relative to the materialistic technology that is available publicly. Now, the final quote, thoughts that deny reincarnation are transformed in the next life into an inner unreality, an inner emptiness of life. This inner unreality and emptiness are experienced as torment, as disharmony, end quote. We could argue very strongly from a paranormal sense, this is what a lot of people, paranormal hunters, when they encounter beings that are not necessarily good, but not necessarily bad, but they're sort of pissed off, and when they try using devices to communicate with these beings, again, think of that as you wish, if you want to call it. I'm not saying it's real or not, but a lot of these spirits, they seem lost. They seem in harm, and they're stuck within that of a relative energetic vicinity or property, which is consistent as well with poltergeists and UFOs. But again, that's not for me to say. It just reminds me again of not just the soul cycle that I brought up at the beginning of this episode as it pertains to the sticky note. Again, a shared metaphysical conjecture that we are prisoners in a devolved realm. It reminds me not only of that, again, a soul recycling loop, but it seems like these benevolent beings or spirits that were once humans and in some cases were not, but let's just say the ones that were humans, are lost in a cycle within the vicinity of a geographical energetic property, let alone the frickin' planet. You see what I'm saying here, folks? With that being said, let me know what you think, and we'll catch all of you very, very soon. Cheers.